Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome. Today we're taking a deep dive into a stack of sources covering recent Catholic news, events, and teachings.
That's right. We've got quite a mix.
Yeah, there's a major Vatican document on human dignity, articles giving us a picture of local church life, ordinations, confirmations, pilgrimages, holy hours, plus some significant insights on bioethics and, well, broader church news.
Absolutely. And what's compelling, I think, is how these sources connect the high-level church teaching with the very real lived experience of faith happening right there on the ground in local communities. And they tackle big global issues, too.
That's exactly the mission.
Yeah.
Pull out the crucial nuggets, the insightful connections, maybe a few surprising facts here and there, giving you a clear understanding of what's happening and, importantly, why it matters. And it's all strictly based on the material provided to us.
Mm-hmm.
So where we begin is with a really foundational concept.
Indeed. Anchoring much of our discussion today is a significant new Vatican document, Dignitas Infinita. That's infinite dignity. It comes from the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith.
Right. And the core message, right from Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez's opening remarks, he has a dicastery. It's powerful. It's direct. Being Christian means actively defending human dignity.
Yeah, he really stresses you can't separate faith or evangelization or spirituality from a deep commitment to the dignity of every single human being. They're just interwoven threads.
What jumps out immediately from the document, and the sources highlight this, is just how broad this defense of dignity is meant to be. It's not just focused on one or two things.
No, not at all. The sources list quite a number of situations the document identifies as grave violations of human dignity.
And it's a challenging list, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it includes some of the most debated topics today. Abortion, the death penalty, gender transition surgery, the scourge of war, sexual abuse, human trafficking.
Threats faced by migrants, surrogacy, euthanasia, and assisted suicide, the marginalization of people with disabilities.
Gender theory, sex change interventions, and it's interesting, the sources list both gender transition surgery and sex change interventions, maybe pointing to slightly different nuances the document addresses.
Could be. And it even includes digital violence.
It really shows the church applying this core concept, this dignity idea, across a vast range of modern and, well, perennial issues.
A really critical point the document makes, according to the sources, is its emphasis on intrinsic dignity. This is key.
Intrinsic meaning?
Meaning a person's dignity doesn't fluctuate. It remains absolute in all circumstances. It's not tied to things like, how smart someone is or how much they know or how much freedom they might have at a given moment.
And the sources point out why this intrinsic understanding is so vital, right?
Yeah.
Because there are other ideas out there.
Exactly. Other philosophical ideas, sometimes using terms like personal dignity, which try to link dignity to things like the capacity for reasoning.
Right. And the danger there is,
well, if you define a person only by the ability to reason, then certain groups like unborn children or the severely dependent elderly or individuals with profound mental disabilities, they might be excluded from having that personal dignity.
But the document rejects that.
Firmly rejects it. It insists that the dignity of every human person is inherent, it's God-given, and it persists no matter the circumstances, the condition, or the stage of life. It's fundamental.
Okay. Let's dig a little deeper into some specific examples from that list that the document talks more about. The sources really call out the document's strong statement on abortion.
Yes, describing it as a telling sign of an extremely dangerous crisis of the moral sense.
A crisis of the moral sense.
Meaning, well, a crisis where society seems to be losing its ability to discern good from evil, especially when it comes to fundamental rights, like the right to life itself. The source uses the document's specific language here to define procured abortion, the deliberate and direct killing of a human being in the initial phase of his or her existence.
Very precise language.
Very.
Okay, moving down the list. War. The document addresses war, stating plainly that it doesn't solve problems.
No, it only makes them worse. It exacerbates them. And that's particularly true, the document notes, in our current era where civilian populations bear such a heavy, just tragic burden.
Mm-hmm. Then there's the issue of migrants.
Right. Well, acknowledging, no one disputes their humanity, the document argues that many migration policies and even just prevailing popular attitudes can effectively treat these individuals as, quote, less worthy, less important, less human.
So it's a challenge to look beyond just the policy debates.
To the underlying perception of dignity itself, yes.
Euthanasia and assisted suicide are framed quite starkly as a profound misuse of the concept of human dignity.
Yeah, essentially turning dignity against life itself. But the document isn't dismissing the reality of suffering. Not at all.
No, it acknowledges the importance of palliative care, right, to alleviate pain.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it affirms the legitimacy of avoiding aggressive medical treatments when death is imminent. But it insists, and this is crucial, that suffering, even profound suffering, does not strip a sick person of their inherent dignity. That dignity remains untouched.
Now, here's where the sources highlight something that might be surprising for some listeners. The document includes digital violence on its list of grave violations.
It does. It notes how digital technologies, despite all their benefits, are increasingly prone to being used for exploitation, exclusion, and violence, and that fundamentally harms human dignity.
And the elaboration on this point in the source is really interesting. It contrasts the online environment, which often lacks, well, embodied encounter with Christ's choice to come in flesh and blood. The document, as cited, points to the necessity of embodied human practices.
Things like physical touch, a handshake, a hug.
Or simply being truly present, attentive to another person. Digital interaction, while it connects us in some ways, often lacks that essential embodied element. And the document sees that as crucial for truly respecting human dignity.
It's a fascinating point, and this deep dive into the document, especially its focus on the dignity of life right from conception, it naturally leads us to another significant topic covered in the sources: in vitro fertilization, or IVF.
Yes, and specifically those recent developments in Alabama that really brought this issue into sharp public focus. The sources report on the Alabama Supreme Court's ruling that frozen human embryos, the ones created through IVF, are legally considered children.
Right, regardless of their developmental stage or the fact that they're outside the womb.
And then they also report the legislative action that followed very quickly.
Almost immediately, yeah. Granting immunity to IVF clinics and medical professionals, specifically shielding them from liability for the death or damage to an embryo during the IVF process. There was a very rapid back and forth there.
So the sources provide a bioethical perspective on IVF, specifically from Father Tadeusz Pekulski. And he directly addresses the status of the embryo.
He does. He argues, as reported in the source, that human embryos are definitively human beings from the very moment of fertilization.
And his reasoning.
His reasoning is biological. He states that fertilization, a new genetically distinct human organism is formed. That's the start of a unique human life in his view.
And he critiques the perspective that views embryos differently.
Right, the view that sees them as, quote, nothing special or merely a means to an end or objects to be used. He strongly pushes back against that.
Okay. And he breaks down the ethical concerns into two main categories, is that right?
That's how the source presents it. First, what he terms the collateral damage problem that's just inherent in the typical IVF process.
Can you describe that a bit more based on what the sources say?
Sure. He points to several issues. IVF protocols usually involve creating multiple embryos, often far more than will ever be implanted. So this inevitably leads to many leftover embryos being discarded. Others are frozen indefinitely, facing very uncertain futures. Then there's the practice, if multiple embryos successfully implant, of selectively reducing WAILU, which means aborting some of the viable fetuses. And he also notes reports, cited in the sources, suggesting elevated rates of birth defects among babies conceived via IVF.
So that's the collateral damage side, the fate of the many embryos created but not brought to term. But he also talks about an intrinsic problem with IVF itself.
Yes, and this gets more to the nature of conception. He argues, as presented in the source, that the very actions involved in IVF are contrary to the full meaning of marriage and marital sexuality as understood within the Catholic tradition.
And what's the reasoning behind that, according to the source material?
Well, the argument is that children should arise naturally from the loving embrace of the marital act between husband and wife, conceived within, the sanctuary of the mother's womb. IVF, by contrast, involves conception happening manufactured and manhandled in laboratory dishes, often by third parties' hired hands, as the source quotes him.
And he uses some strong language here, suggesting that creating children this way risks creating an exploitable subclass.
That's right. The source quotes him saying these individuals are unjustly instrumentalized and dehumanized because they're brought into existence not as the free and undeserved gifts of spousal love, but rather through human craftiness and scheming.
So it's a critique of the process of creation itself, rooted back in that concept of intrinsic dignity we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
Okay, shifting gears now. The sources don't just cover these high-level documents and complex ethical debates. They also give us a real window into how faith is lived out day-to-day in local church communities.
Which is a powerful contrast, isn't it? Moving from the abstract to the very concrete.
It really is.
And it shows the vibrant, active reality of the church. One example highlighted is the ordination of 8 new Holy Cross priests at Notre Dame.
Yeah, the sources describe this as a great blessing, noting the diverse talents these men bring and calling them wonderful ministers of God's friendship.
And Bishop Wack's message to these newly ordained priests, as reported, it really gets to the essence of their calling. He told them quite pointedly, this is not all about you.
That's a necessary reminder for anyone in ministry, isn't it? What did he say it is about then?
He emphasized that it's about Jesus Christ's dying and rising from the dead. And fundamentally, he said, it's about the people you will be serving. He made it pretty clear that despite years of preparation, the most crucial part is their heartfelt intention.
Which is?
I mean, with all my heart to love him and to help show you how to do the same, it's really about channeling God's love to others.
And the sources give us little glimpses into the variety of ways these new priests are already living that out, reflecting their unique backgrounds. We hear about ministries like teaching junior high science and religion,
serving as dorm rectors, helping with religious education, assisting with marriage preparation.
Yeah, it's a reminder that serving the church takes many forms, uses all sorts of different talents.
Absolutely. Another snapshot of local faith in action from the sources is a confirmation mass led by Bishop Rhodes for young people.
And his message to the confirmands sounds like he was both encouraging and practical.
Very much so. He urged them to be strong in their faith, to be courageous witnesses to Christ out in the world. And he specifically mentioned living out their beliefs through concrete actions, caring for the poor, the sick, the needy, actively rejecting violence.
But he didn't just stop at lofty ideals, right? He gave them practical advice.
Exactly. Actionable advice for nurturing their faith. Read scripture regularly, dedicate time and find a quiet place for prayer, and maybe most relatable, he told them to simply talk to Jesus like a friend.
I like the personal touches shared from that mass, too. Bishop Rose reportedly compared the confirmands to figures like St. Peter and St. John.
Reminding them that even giants of faith had flaws, which should offer hope to, well, everyone.
Right. And that humorous but memorable instruction to smell each other's foreheads.
Yes. As a reminder that they are now called to be the fragrance of Christ to the world. Those kinds of details, they make the teaching stick, don't they?
They really do. Moving beyond sacraments, the source has also highlighted some communal prayer events. The Way of St. Joseph pilgrimage is one example.
Described as an accessible event, which is notable, the source mentions it can accommodate different walking abilities, not just those who can do the full 5 miles.
That's good to know.
Yeah, allowing people to walk and pray alongside St. Joseph, reflecting on his life journeys and offering their intentions together.
And then there was a holy hour for vocations, also led by Bishop Rhodes.
Yes, and this one thoughtfully connected the act of Eucharistic adoration to the reality of the resurrection.
Yeah, so.
Well, he explained the significance of Sunday Mass being obligatory because it's the day of the resurrection. And he reflected on how the disciples, had varying experiences encountering the risen Christ.
Right. Some saw him, some doubted.
Exactly. But today, he pointed out, we find Jesus consistently present, though hidden, veiled in the Eucharist. It's a beautiful parallel, really, between those initial encounters and our encounter in the Mass and adoration.
That is a nice connection. Finally, the sources give us a broader context, touching on various other news items and challenges facing the church and the world.
A bit of a wider lens, yes.
Circling back to the theme of migrants, one source reiterated the Vatican document's points and specifically noted Pope Leo XIV urging respect for migrants while challenging what was described as Trump-led immigration policies. Now, this detail is reported as found in the source material, reflecting a specific perspective presented there.
Right. Important to note, it's reporting what the source said. There's also a report giving a snapshot of demographic shifts in the U.S. church.
Oh, yeah. What does that show?
Noting a decline of parishes in some historic urban dioceses, particularly in the Northeast and Midwest, but contrasting that with areas experiencing growth, often in the South and West, it paints a picture of the church adapting, or perhaps needing to adapt, to changing populations.
Interesting. The sources also mention bishops reflecting on the enduring legacy of racism, both in society and within the church.
Describing it as a powerful encounter that elicited great emotion. It points to ongoing efforts to confront these difficult historical realities.
And then there's a truly heartbreaking situation reported from Mexico.
Yes, where drug cartels are not only present, but actively entering politics, leading to violence against candidates. A bishop there described it in the source as something that should move us and shake our hearts. It highlights just grave threats to justice and peace in that region.
Just terrible. Other brief but significant notes included.
Yeah.
Let's see. The Pope's recent message reflecting on St. Francis's stigmata.
Serving as a reminder that Christ's suffering ultimately leads to victory. And also bishops in Rwanda expressing solidarity and closeness with survivors of the genocide there, still dealing with that trauma.
We also saw mention of a French court ruling that found a Canadian cardinal and others guilty of serious misconduct for expelling a nun without cause.
Which points to complex legal and governance challenges within the church internationally. These things happen.
And finally, a note about the Beautiful Light video series.
Recommended as part of the National Eucharistic Revival, offering a deep dive into the sacred mysteries of the Mass. So, initiatives aimed at deepening understanding of core Catholic practices.
It's clear the Church today is operating across so many fronts, defending fundamental principles, engaging with really complex modern ethical issues.
Nurturing faith at the local level, day in and day out, and grappling with significant global and internal challenges. It's a lot.
So as we pull back from this deep dive, we've really journeyed through a landscape shaped by the Church's consistent teaching on human dignity. We've seen how it applies to life's beginning and end, to vulnerable populations, even to our digital interactions.
And we've witnessed those vibrant, tangible expressions of faith ordinations, confirmations, communal prayer alongside confronting the very real challenges of migration, social injustice, and internal governance issues.
So what stands out to you from this complex picture we've just walked through?
And here's something maybe for you, the listener, to ponder. If the core of Christian life, as that Vatican document stresses, is defending human dignity in all its forms, how does that understanding challenge or maybe shape your own view of the world and the people you encounter daily, especially concerning some of those difficult issues we touched on?
Yeah, and considering those examples of faith in action, new priests dedicating their lives, young people embracing their faith journey, how might those examples inspire or perhaps inform how you live out your own beliefs?
It leaves us with a final thought, drawing from that reflection on St. Francis's stigmata mentioned in the sources. The idea that Christ's glorified wounds show us that even the ugliest or most painful parts of life, of history, can, through grace, become beautiful but glorious.
So how might applying that perspective change how you approach your own struggles, or maybe the profound suffering and challenges you see in the world around you? Something to think about.